Hi, everyone. My name is Carmen Durwald, and I will be hosting today's episode of Behind the Founders. And I will be interviewing Kim Celic today. Hi, Kim. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Carmen. I'm doing well. Thank you. Happy to be here and talking to you
Happy to
today.
have you here as well.
Yeah.
Happy to have you here as well, Kim. Could you give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you're currently working on?
Yeah. Okay, sure. I currently, I guess, the founder and CEO of a company called Transformative People Solutions. It is a company that helps other companies scale and grow or go through any kind of transformation or merger. I started this company about 2 years ago. And ultimately, what I really focus on is leadership, people, culture, processes. I think with growth or any kind of change comes complexity. And I have been a part of that for many, many years. So, some of my background and why I started this is prior to that, I was a chief people officer for many, many years and kind of in that space. And throughout the years, I really understood and thought what was really important is that there's a real strategy around people. And I would work for companies and they didn't have any, right? It's a lot of times companies start and when it comes to their people, it's an afterthought, right? And they kind of build a culture without realizing they're building it and they're not intentional about what they're doing. And so for me, it's really important to ask the companies that I now work with, right? Kind of who do you want to be when you grow up, essentially? And where do you want to go? You're growing or you're going through some sort of transformation, but what does that look like? And to make sure that they're asking themselves those really hard questions that oftentimes companies don't, right? They get really good at doing something and they just keep moving and spinning. And so that's usually what I'm brought in is like, okay, let's just reset. Let's ensure we know who we are or who we want to be. And then what I help do is sort of reverse and engineer a real strategy around people, culture, process, leadership in order to achieve those goals. And obviously, I look for two things. And this is where I get excited about what I do in my company. Yes, I love helping companies grow and doing that the right way. But ultimately, my real, and I don't know if you're familiar with the term ikigai, right? My purpose, my ikigai is really about helping companies understand that employees need to feel fulfilled. And so making sure that you're creating the right structure and process and culture that allows for fulfillment and allows your employees to feel like there's really purpose driven in what they're doing and it aligns to what the company goals are. So I hope that wasn't too long winded, right? You're kind of just asking me that, but that's sort of why I started the company and what I'm doing now. And so now, right, I started this company because I had worked in only one company for a really long time. And I said to myself, I want to be able to kind of take this way and the approach that I have, and I've seen the success at my old company, and bring this to more than just one company. I think a lot of people need this, and it's something that a lot of people don't spend the time and money on when they should. So I'm often like the white flag goes up of now we need help, right? And that's fine. And for me, what I like to do is look for all the opportunities, the great things that they're doing, but ultimately make sure there's real structure and strategy around not just your people, but your operating systems. And so I like to use the word organizational architect. And that's, kind of
Beautiful.
what I do. I didn't make it up. Trust me. It's been around, but that's ultimately what I'm doing. I'm creating the architecture for this organization. But, I think when I think of architecture, it's too structured, right? And so I really look at companies as almost living organisms, right? And so you have to create structure, but they have to be malleable, right? You need a framework that can move and flow depending upon, outside things and variables that oftentimes you can't predict. And so, I try to be really mindful of creating those when I work with companies to ensure, right, there are always different ways that, these processes and structures can move and can flow in order to what I look for is to gain resilience. And that's what I think is really important is creating really resilient companies. So yeah, yeah, that's really why I started what transformative people solutions, and it's what keeps me going again and again. Is ultimately, if you break all of that down into very simplistic terms, it's just helping companies create a really great place for people to work
Of course.
who feel fulfilled in what they do, but also to drive performance, right? And to do that the right way So ultimately that's a very simplistic way of breaking down what I enjoy doing, what my passion is, and what Transformative People Solutions does for companies.
Yeah. First of all, Kim, thank you so much for really just highlighting your story of what really inspired you in terms of your passion working with people, transforming it into a very healthy and intentional workplace as well. As someone who also comes from an HR recruitment background, I was also taking a look at your LinkedIn. I see that you have extensive experience within the field of HR. A lot of the things that you do mention, I completely resonate as well. I feel like oftentimes as we are building and growing companies, we sometimes often lose sight of things and we tend to have this tendency to go into autopilot mode, which of course means that, we're not taking care of the culture in terms of engagement. Are the people happy? Are the people feeling good as well? So I feel like it is quite interesting, a lot of the points that you mentioned too. And for me right now, I do have a lot of questions, a lot of follow-up questions based on that. But the first thing I want to ask is, so I'm taking a look at your LinkedIn profile. You started Transformative People Solutions shortly over 2 years ago. I'd love to know what kind of companies, what kind of industries or businesses have you been supporting? Are they mainly startups or are they also larger scale organizations? Could you tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so ultimately it's any company that I work with can be at a startup mode, but it's about growth and transformation. So
Mm,
they're kind of going through some area where they're recognizing I need structure, I need more strategy around my people. We've created a great culture, but we want to scale it. How do we keep that culture? So I have been brought in for different reasons. And so I work with a lot of different clients, all different stages, but really at the time where they're identifying, and oftentimes it's where they could have probably called me about a year earlier, and but that's okay. People don't know what they don't know, right? Until you understand it a little bit better and then they have it firsthand experience and they get it. But yeah, it's really been exciting because it's all different stages, but ultimately it's growth, it's transformation. So, I really specialize on that and innovative solutions. So, if you're just looking for like a cleanup, right? Or somebody to help kind of keep things running the same way, that is not, interesting to me, nor do I think that's what where my time should be used.
mm,
Kind of as my own philosophy, right, is I think that people change and grow as quickly as technology. And so,
absolutely.
my big, I guess you could say, hiccup with a lot of, human resource or people functions in many companies is that a lot of times they try to do this like plug and play, right? Oh, well, that always worked. And let's try to do this and just keep it consistent. And for me, I'm like, you need to be disruptive and innovative, and you need to understand, right? People are changing and what they're looking for is changing in work itself. And so you need to put that into consideration when you're creating, your systems and your processes. And oftentimes people aren't because it's number one, harder. It requires
Of
more
course.
thought, more strategy, more alignment throughout all of the, kind of operational components of an organization. And so, for me, it's like I would like to kind of disrupt that completely too. And, make sure that number one, the people teams have a seat at every table, right? And I'm tired of hearing that they don't. I'm also tired of hearing that, the HR teams or the people teams report to like a cost center, like a CFO. And so I'll say this directly. If that's happening in your company now, you're a dinosaur. That's not what you should be doing. People are very, very important. And so that role should be right there on the right-hand side of the CEO. And so, that's oftentimes, when I'm brought in and some of the companies I work with, it's really kind of disrupting a lot of also just how the people team is viewed in general. And, the function itself, and then, the value that it truly adds to a company, if done right, it is
Yeah.
driving. It's a driving force in most companies. So yeah, that's sort of a passion of mine too. Is a little bit of disruption there, and making sure that these processes and overall structure and strategies are innovative, and they're disrupting enough, right, where they're aligning with what are the needs of the people that work for them and also what are the needs of the business.
Right. So you mentioned a lot about, disruptive culture and also, a lot of companies right now, they are looking to grow. They are looking to expand operations and also bring more people on board. From your experience working with all these different companies that are focusing a lot on growth, sometimes there's also, I would say, the risk that they overlook the culture and the well-being of the people. From your experience, what would you say are some early warning signs that a company has outgrown the way it's operating internally?
Well, that's a great, I love that question. But I'm going to answer it a little differently because when I brought in and people are scratching their head of, I don't know why it's working or we can't retain people. And,
Mhm.
that's what's exciting for me because I think so many companies get hiring wrong. And I don't mean that they don't mean well, but
Of
they
course.
get it wrong because they don't actually know who they're hiring for, right? They're
Mhm.
not hiring for the right culture and they're not being, I would say, relentless about it. And they should. And, there's a couple of methods that I have used throughout the years because to me, it really is about building the right teams and hiring the right people. You can't grow a company, you can't do that right if you don't know how to do that properly, but doing it for your company. And I think that is what I see all the time, right? I see what I'm just going to use catfishing, right? It's like
Yeah.
you have, I work with like CEOs and like we're cool, we have a ping pong table,
Yeah, I
but
hear that a lot too.
right. But then they come in and they, like, don't give PTO, right? So, they're, like, nickel and diming over, 2 extra days of PTO for their employees, but they're cool and they, have that. So it's like, let's be real. And so I
Yes.
work with companies, CEOs, founders, and it's like, let's be honest of who we really are, right? Because you don't want to tell somebody you're cool and then they
Mhm.
come in and then actually nope, those are things that you don't think are important. And, people, and I'm just using that as an example because that's often brought up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But to me, it's a catfishing. And so ultimately, it's really being, I think, just honest and truthful of who you are as an organization. And so, like, when I come in, and so what's hindering growth, right? Oftentimes is that they're hiring the wrong people. Or in many cases, they hired people that they've outgrown, right? And you all like, I mean, you know it with AI, with everything. If you are not a learner, if you are not learning, you're going to be left behind. And so that comes down also with culture, with people, with companies is okay, who were we, but what do we want to be, right? Okay, we want to be this company. What human capital or what people do we need to do that properly? And be really open and honest about it, right? Think about this the same way you would sort of like your dating app, right? And I'm using
Yeah.
these in because right, it's the
Yeah,
same thing. It's like
it
right, you
is.
want upfront as possible. You basically want people to not work for you, right? You want to eliminate a large portion of people that are just going to waste your time because they're not going to fit into the culture that you are and that you need to build the company that, to get to your goals. And so I think a lot of companies do that wrong because number one, like anybody on an app, right? They
Yeah.
want to be liked. They want everybody to like them. They want validation, right? There's
Mhm.
all of these things that come with it. But what you're really doing is just wasting time. You're wasting time and you're not being deliberate in what you're looking for and you're communicating something that's different. And so, when you have a large portion of your employees that are unhappy or don't feel valued, it's because you hired the wrong people. Or number two, you pretended to be a company that you're not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Happens a
and
lot.
it
Yeah.
comes down to that.
Mhm.
And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but it really is that. And so, you can sit there and ask a million questions and, it's like, okay, is this really helping you find the right people? Well, it could, but if you don't know what kind of company you are and what kind of systems and behaviors and values this company really is made up of and what you actually need to accomplish the goals that you're setting into place, well, then you're all wasting your time, right? You're going to keep having
Mhm.
that cycle and that turnover, having the people that don't want to be there. So yeah, I think that was a long-winded way. I hope that answered some of it. But
Yeah.
yes, to go back to your original question, there's
Yeah.
a lot of
Absolutely.
different things that come up, right? That say, ooh, okay, yeah. Our culture was this and now it's no longer this, right? There's
Mhm.
a billion different things that happen. But you don't want to you want to keep what's really great and you want to keep the things that align to where the company sees itself going, right? What are the things that they've learned and part of their culture that's great, that's helped them get to where they are? And then what part of that culture do we need to help you get to where you're going to go?
Absolutely. I just want to reiterate what you mentioned about this whole process of catfishing, right? This is something that is quite interesting because, like you said, there are so many parallels when it comes to hiring. It is like dating because it is a two-way street. The company needs to see, okay, are these people a great fit? Can they help grow my culture? Can they support my team and execute all of these different goals and projects and milestones? And then the people who are applying for jobs, the candidates who are applying for jobs, they also need to see, will I fit into this culture? Will this be the right environment to ensure that I'll be thriving as well? So honestly, it actually goes both ways when you think about candidates going to interview. I think there's always this misconception where, oh, the candidates have to convince the company or the employer that they're a good fit. But it would also go the same way that the employer would also have to convince them that, hey, we have this to offer to you to support you in terms of your growth, to ensure that you're here for the long term. And oftentimes, like you said, it happens a lot that whether it's published on the company website, whether it's published in the job description, in that aspect, there's also parts where there's a bit of catfishing going on. Like you brought this good example about, hey, we have a cool ping pong table, we have a free coffee machine, or we're like a family, all of these different buzzwords. And oftentimes, like you said, you want to as a company, you want to like impress the people, the candidates to join. But what ends up happening is that in the long term, the operations is going to suffer because, like you said, it's the wrong people. It's all about being truthful. So this is something that I just want to say that I completely resonate with, and it is happening more and more often as well.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So I can actually segue into this a little bit, but so I am actually writing a book specifically about
Oh,
this.
amazing! Yeah.
Yeah. It's called The Fourth Relationship. And so essentially, right, it's thinking about work as your fourth most important relationship.
Mm,
And so it takes the voice of both the individual and then also the company, right? So it's sort of like, here's ways that things can be overcomplicated. Here's a way to really view it. But ultimately, what it comes down to, right, for both the individual and the company, like any relationship somebody has, is about self awareness, right?
mm,
And so how much can you understand and know yourself, right? And where you are in your life and what you're looking for in this relationship, right? What do you need from this today? And that's both for the individual and for the company, right? And so, it's almost like, what stage are you in? And understanding that and being really, I think, just to be honest and authentic about it. And that is the best way for, I believe, right? And this is, we don't know where the book will go, but for me,
of
it's a
course.
passion of mine because
Yeah.
I think that if people really viewed it that way, and especially in, the amount of times and how many interviews I've probably given in my life,
Mhm.
and I think about it because I wanted to give people sort of this cheat sheet of like, you should be interviewing me and this company as much as I'm interviewing you,
Yes.
right? And this is our first date, in some
Yes,
cases, or second
exactly.
date,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So drill in, like, do you want to just be liked? Do you want to waste your time, right? This is an important relationship, this is something that you need to pay attention to.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was just a segue, and I agree though. It really it comes down to, I think people do not view what work is and what it means to them the way that they probably should. And so I'm trying to help them navigate that a little bit easier,
Of
hopefully. We'll
course,
see.
of course. Yeah, very interesting. Tell me a little bit more about your book. What inspired you to start? When did you start writing it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. My old team that used to report to me, sometimes I, would get on sort of not a soapbox per se, but, there are just certain things, right, where you think about the employee experience. And I'm, a big proponent of like, pay attention to the overall employee experience in any company. That's how you're building your strategy. You should align that to, the customer or the client experience. Because if you do that right, like you will see the benefits and you're going to see production and all your goals being met. But ultimately, I would always break things down into relationships because everything I think in life is a relationship, right? And so, oftentimes we would hire a lot of people right out of college and, they would move on. And I would always say, this is great. This is a great thing. You're not gonna, the likelihood of you marrying your first love is very rare, right? And it's the
Yeah.
same thing in work, right? This was something that you came for a certain time, you learned what you needed to, right? And then you're moving on. And I think, what I would say, it started that way because I would always coach quite a bit some leaders that were really upset when people were leaving or moving on. And I'm like, we need to be honest of who we are as a company. We don't have those layers. We don't have those opportunities. So do you want somebody to stay here just because they, still love us or care about us, but they're not growing or learning and we can't
Mm,
provide that for them? No, you want them to move on, right? There's like, for me, especially as a leader, the happiest thing was for somebody to find another role where they can excel and be challenged if we couldn't offer that. And, oftentimes you can't, right? And every company has its limitations. And so, you have to be realistic about that. And you have to think, okay, what's best for everybody here? Because ultimately, yes, you can keep somebody here longer if you give them a little more money or maybe change their title. But if they're not really growing and they're not evolving in the way they need to, they're going to feel that, right? And that's going to come back to you someday and maybe a form of resentment or,
yeah.
just dissatisfaction overall. So, I think to me, that's how this book started is like, me kind of having these conversations and then people saying, oh, yeah, you should maybe write something about that. And so it just
Me?
sort of kept going. And yeah, so that's where I am with it. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been definitely a fun journey. And it's funny because, when it comes to work and relationships, the amount of stories that I have is,
Of
quite a
course.
bit. And so, it's kind of interesting to try to put as many of them into that as sort of learning
Absolutely.
lessons and yeah. So
Yeah, I feel like there's so much power when it comes to personal stories because this is something that people are able to resonate and connect to as well, so that they're able to understand, okay, this is someone else's story, this is someone else's experience, and these stories would help other people to succeed and grow, whether they're building their own business and everything like that. So, about your book, is it already out? Where
no,
can
not
we
yet.
have access yet?
Not
It's
yet.
process.
No, it's not
Okay.
no, not there, but yeah, it's hard
Okay.
for me not to mention it, but yeah, no, it's not fully done, and yeah. So
Okay.
at some point, right, there will be like excerpts will be coming out, but yeah, I'm hoping to be fully finished by, I guess, summer, July or August, so
Amazing.
yeah.
Okay, so that's in
All
a
de
few months' time.
yeah, all depending on how much time I can give to it, but yeah, that's where I am.
Of course.
Yeah.
Exciting, exciting. Well, definitely as soon as the book is out, we're definitely going to include further information so that our listeners out there would be surely able to check it out, access it, and read what you have to say and the insights that you've gathered in over the extensive period of years that you've worked in the field of working with people and so on.
Yeah, thanks, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Kim, so I would love to learn a little bit more about your background, your story within HR. So, as mentioned, we touched a little bit about it as well. You've had quite a long, extensive history within HR. I see that on LinkedIn. You were working in all different elements of HR, including as an executive recruiter, in branding, generalist, direct. You were at Juice Generation, J. Walter Thompson Worldwide. Then you were a chief people officer at the Strategic Financial Solutions. What inspired you to start and build your own business?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I'll say it again. I've always been an entrepreneur. It's just like in my blood, and I've always started my own thing very young, and it's something that I thrive on. So I like sort of not I want to say chaos, but complexity, and I like taking things that can feel very complex to other people and simplifying it, and I like to build, right? So I think that's just ultimately the end of it, right? As an
Mm,
entrepreneur, you like to build things, and I really love to build. And when I, decided to do this, there were certain things going on in my old business, and I said to myself, you know, I'm at a place in my life where I've learned so much because I have, obviously worked in many different capacities. And I'm like, I've kind of come up with my own philosophy on people and the people function itself. And I just see the benefits of it, right? And I believe so strongly that, this is a time to really help change and disrupt and transform companies in the right way. I think it's also like what really drove me to do this because I want to be able to add as much value to multiple companies. But it's the amount of people that I talk to in my personal life, my professional life that like just don't like what they're doing or where they work. And
Mm.
it's sort of like, okay, like how do I help that? Right? Where can we make this better? And I think that at my old company we did a really great job of that, but it's how can I help do that with other companies? Let's make it a really great place where people actually feel, and I'm going to use the word fulfilled. It's something that I use a lot because I think in the world of people or HR, they used to use the word satisfied, and I just
Mm.
makes me want to vomit. And then
Yeah.
they moved to employee, engagement, which so I always say it, right? If you think about it as a relationship, right? If you're in a relationship with a person and you're like, oh, do you want to know if they're engaged? Like that feels so just to me almost medicinal. I was like,
Mhm. Yeah, I get
and
what
I'm
you
like,
mean. Yeah.
I wanna know somebody's fulfilled, right? Like, let's
Yeah.
get
It
deeper
hits
here.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's stay off the surface. Like, I wanna
Mhm.
go deeper, and so that's how I feel, right? I believe in employee fulfillment, and I think part of that is really having people feel like they can be their full, honest, authentic selves at work, right? That's number 1. Number 2, that they are learning more about themselves and what they're doing, and then number 3, what is their own purpose, and how is that aligning to what they're doing at their company, right? Does it align with that? And that to me is if you pay attention to those things, like, you will come to what I just like to call employee fulfillment. And I will definitely challenge anybody who still uses the word employee satisfaction or employee engagement, especially in the people space.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, like, again, the whole comparison with dating or finding the right person or finding the right partner, you don't want to just be, oh, I feel satisfied with my partner. It sounds very more like you're settling as well because you want to go more, you want something more, you want something that really enables you to grow, that will make you wake up every day in the morning and feel really excited. Hey, you know what? I have this purpose that I want to fulfill. And despite all the challenges, despite the busy schedules, you want to find something that really keeps your cup full as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So, Kim, let's talk a little bit about the organization setup, your team setup. How's that looking? How many people are in the team, and what has driven the most growth within your team?
Yeah. So I mean, right now I'm sort of a solo operator with the exception of contractors. And so, kind of working with other individuals that I used to work with in different capacities. And so bringing them in for different reasons. And so a big focus for me is trying to bring as many of them back full time. Right. And so
Okay.
kind of what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I spent a really long time working with some of the most talented individuals out there and probably put a little stamp of my own sort of philosophy on people, on all of them. And so for those that are still willing to work with me, my goal is to bring everybody back as much as I can together for really interesting different projects and challenges, but ultimately with the idea and the mindset of we are trying to accomplish a
Mm,
really great place to work and where employees are fulfilled and the
yeah.
business is growing and scaling and it feels seamless. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that currently you are hiring different contractors. What kind of functions or roles are they fulfilling within the scope of your work?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends upon the client, to be honest with you, and so, recruiting is always something
Yeah.
that
Of
I can
course. Yeah.
always tap into, especially those that really know how to interview and know how to recruit and what they're recruiting for, makes a big difference, and, I know a lot of companies are using AI right now, and so that's maybe a whole other podcast we can talk about.
Me too.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting time, let's just put it that way. I think there are certain things to save time with, but, from a human capacity, I don't think that, human beings are going away or going to be eliminated from the recruiting process if you really want success in your company. So
Mm,
yeah, so that's one, and then a lot of, I would say, leadership development, learning development, right? And then sometimes just in general, like the overall employee experience. So understanding, some companies do not have anybody that understands that function. So I work with some other people to kind of put that in there and what does that look like? And, from a, I would just say like a human resource business partner perspective, kind of integrating that in sort of the like where strategy and operations mesh and where execution happens. So yeah, I think for right now those are probably the three bigger areas that I will tap into
mm,
contractors and yeah, people that
yeah,
I've worked with. Yeah.
of course. Yeah, obviously, you mentioned that this can be another topic for another podcast, but I would still be curious to hear a little bit your thoughts about AI, right? It is quite, I would say, like a hot topic nowadays. People have different opinions about the role that AI plays, whether, in the business or also in terms of there's also this fear that AI will replace some jobs. What are your thoughts about AI?
I mean, listen, I love AI and I use it different AI for different reasons and I think it's wonderful and I think it's only going to help and enhance the workplace. But, I like anything else, right? I will come into a company and oftentimes, people are all over the place and I always say, "What are we looking to solve?" And so that's always the question I ask when it comes to AI. What are you looking to solve, right? Are you trying to save time or what are you looking to solve? Because be really like understand what that is first before you decide, okay, then how do you in fact leverage AI and what
Mm,
does that look like? Because you want to know what you want to solve first and then you also want to know how to measure that. Right?
absolutely.
Because a lot of times right now what I see is everybody is trying to integrate and put it in and they're forcing and they're saying this is a, priority. But who's measuring the return of it? And, is it really creating the results that you're looking for? Because also, what are you looking to solve? What
Mm,
do you need to solve with this? And I think that's where I think AI is wonderful and it can be used for so many things. And I think that it will continue to help really disrupt work in a great way. And I think that the sooner that people embrace it and realize that this is a great tool, right?
yeah.
This is not replacing, it's a tool. And
Yes.
so, right, here's something that we're using and it's a new tool and we can leverage it in X, Y, and Z ways and then to be consistent in how you're using it, right? Because that's going to be an issue too long term in companies is how are we all using this? Are we all using it the same way, right? Is that what we need to be doing? Let's make sure that, there's alignment there because, like anything, you want to make sure there's alignment because it's cultural, right? This is like systematic and this is about process driven. So just the
Mm,
alignment needs to be there. But yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot of companies that are trying to leverage it and push it really hard, and they're not stepping back and realizing what are we trying to solve, and
right.
let's make sure we measure that so that we know this was actually the right move. So
Mm,
I think there will be some backlash. Companies are going to see that because they're going to move really fast to try to disrupt and do all these things, and they're not thinking it through. It's a little bit more impulsive, but I ultimately think it's gonna change work in a really great way, so
mm,
I think the sooner people embrace it and integrate it into kind of what they do and help find efficiency or whatever it is they're trying to solve, and I keep saying that, I'm sorry if I'm being redundant, I think the better off they'll be, but I do believe that there is a human element that cannot be replaced, and so,
yeah.
it's
100%
just
agree on that.
right, and so the people that are the fear, right? "Oh, my job," it's just you have to remember we all have a lot of skills, right? And, some of them you need to keep learning and leveraging, and this is an
Mhm.
opportunity to kind of use different skills, and, it's I think people are concerned because there are different parts of their career, if well, I don't like that word career, I don't know, I wish there was a better
Mhm.
word.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that that's what's scary is just they have to change and they realize I need to learn something new and I have to, kind of leverage a different skill that I haven't maybe leveraged before. But
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah.
I believe that sometimes when it comes to AI, yeah, people have this fear because it's also change. It would mean having to go beyond your comfort zone to upskill on skills that you normally don't really utilize or use. And I would say that it is definitely like an opportunity to try something new. But I think as humans, right, we tend to find more comfort when it comes to familiarity because going out into the unknown, it is really scary as well. So that's where the fear comes in. And of course, some people would feel there's a whole group of people that would feel very uncomfortable to try something new, leverage AI because of the fear holding back as well. But at the end of the day, I believe that when used right, AI can be a useful tool to streamline better workflow and make things more efficient and automate processes while still ensuring there's a balance of the human element. Like you said, that can never be replaced. There is something very unique about that as well, too. Just a follow up question about alignment within your team. What kind of tools or approaches do you implement, especially when it comes to introduction of new tools, AI, to ensure that the people you work with are all aligned, that they understood in terms of practices that are done in the same standardized way
Well, do you mean my team or the companies that I work with?
within your
'Cause
team? Yeah, within your team. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, that's yeah, I mean, ultimately because we work with other companies, right?
Yeah.
I guess I hope I'm understanding this correctly. Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me it's communication. So really clear communication. And so then systems and frameworks. So, I believe in the companies that I work with, I have, the EOS method, right, for scaling and then scaling up. And so, kind of a combination. And so a lot of it comes down to just like, meeting cadence and rhythms, communication, priorities, how you break your priorities down, your rocks, like your strategic plan, right? And so, when it comes to, I guess for me, integrating what we're doing and how we're using AI, if we're going to use that as an example, right? It's ultimately knowing who's the priority, who owns it, how are we all working together towards it, what does that look like, how are we measuring it, right? And then how are we being consistent with it and tracking it?
Mhm.
So I know
Right.
it's kind of vague in general, but yeah, it's
Of
hard to
course.
give really specific ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it's all about alignment, communication, making sure everybody is having the full clarity and understanding how things should be done in terms of the processes, in terms of the usage of tools as well. Great, Kim. I do have one final question. So, especially for the listeners out there looking to start their own thing, build their own business, company, go also have this entrepreneur mindset. If you could share one message or advice for people who are considering to start their own business, what would it be?
Hmm, that's interesting. I mean, I think you have to be slightly delusional, and I say that in a good way, right?
Interesting.
It's
Love that.
almost like you have to like in your mind, right? Like know that you have value to add and that's it, right? And so kind of go out there and that's a part of it. But I'm gonna go back to what you said before around comfort and growth, right? Because I think neurologically, in neuroscience, we're designed, right, to seek comfort, right? We're
Right.
designed to stay alive
Yes.
ultimately, So the growth part is harder. But yeah, I think for me, I challenge anybody that is at a place in their life where they're like, should I? I mean, it's you read all of these books, and I think Daniel Pink just had, I don't know if you read his book Regret, right? And I could
Mhm.
probably quote a lot of different people, but his book Regret, it's like you don't regret the things that you try. And
Okay.
just so that's what I said, right? It's kind of like if you don't try it and you wanted to, that's what you're going to regret. And so, failure is only steps to success,
Yeah.
and it's all learning. It's like anything in life. And so, I always support anybody who's trying to start something or take a path that's, not as followed as everybody else. It's kind of what makes the world go round and what makes things interesting. So, and I love seeing what people do and where their ideas come from. And I'm sure you do too, which is why you have this podcast, right? It's fascinating to me. And,
Mhm.
did I think 2 years ago I would be, in doing this? Probably not, right? And so, that is life. And so I tell everybody take a risk, but I'm
Yeah.
also probably slightly delusional.
Yeah, love that, love that. I think it's an encouragement because I feel like as humans, we do love to conform a lot. So if we are having different sets of ideas or doing things in a different way, then we're being called out for being delusional or weird. But that's actually where the uniqueness comes from. That's where ideas, innovation, businesses also come to life as well. So love that, love that. And also what you mentioned about, you know what, failures, it's really just an invitation for new opportunity. It's not the end of the world. It's an invitation for to explore further as well. And I think Yeah, you definitely summed it up really well. And hopefully, for the listeners out there, they would feel inspired and motivated and encouraged to take that leap of faith and just do it without overthinking as well. Kim, thank you so much again for coming here
Yeah. Thanks
to
for having me.
share. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. So, this is Behind the Founders with Kim Celic. Be sure to stay tuned for the next episode.